You saw the lady brought the tall table up, and then she came down and took a look at me, and she said, no, you need a short table. And same way, time-wise, I assured them that I would remain short. Before I start, I need a little help. Would you share with me the first word that comes to mind when I say the word car? What comes to mind immediately? Car. Drive. Violence. Gasoline. Wheels. Tires. What comes to mind when I say the word car? Driver? We've heard a lot of different words. Does anybody else have any other words that come to mind? Many different ones, I thought so. We're going to talk about the 98%, the 93% of communication that you rarely hear about. You've attended many communication classes. I'm aware that I'm speaking to a very literate class on communication, so why on earth yet one more? Bottom line is because you have studied very well the 7% of communication, and I'm going to explain that further. But as an illustration, how many of you have dogs? And have you ever said, come on, fighter, let's go outside? And they did? Did they understand the word you said? Not a word, but they did it anyway because they understood what you meant by how you said it and what they saw in your body. So it's what is communication really? We communicate as if the dog far more than we really want to admit. And that's what we want to talk about. I'm going to share a little bit about the brain, how it works, and why, to give you the tool so that you can better control, better understand what's going on in the world. Understand the parts of the brain that are affected immediately with every bit of communication. I'm going to share with you a little about charisma. What makes people want to hear what you have to say? What's critical about your presence that will attract people to bring you? But one of the most important things I want to share is also some techniques on emotional control that you may not be aware of. These will be Emotional Control 401. I have been teaching anger management for now 28 years in courts and in prisons. I've been the ombudsman of our district, working with some interesting personality situations within our district for the last 12 years. I have studied with Marshall Rosenberg, I have studied with William Ury, and studied many classes. But then, the last decade ago, for my anger management, I decided it's time to go a step further. And understand more about the physiology of brain. And I've been re-enrolled back in the university and to study the neurology. So Viktor Frankl talked about that space, which is our freedom. But that space that he talked about is far more than the freedom. Albert Moravian in 1971. Albert Moravian is a research psychologist. He was still with UCLA, but in 1971 he quantified and did the major research in the wonderful little book Silent Messages, and defined communication as 55% through our body, primarily through our face, 38% how you said it. Am I the only one here that had a mother that said, it's not what you said, it's how you said it, go to your room? You know, I see a few hands. And so the value of the tonality of the word, I said, I'm sorry, isn't very convincing, is it? So how do we say it? So then the 7% of our communication are what we study and study and study. When we prepare a speech, we prepare the words perfectly. but what is the presence? And that's critical. So, what I opened with, I could do with any noun in the dictionary. I ask you, what is your first word? Is it car? And I got everybody a different answer. And if I'd have continued on, it was continued and continued. If I have a class of 20, and I'll ask them to write down 3 different things, and I'll get 55 different words. So the 800 words we typically use on a daily basis, with 14,000 meanings on average. Every single word in the English language has 17 meanings, and you think we communicate with words? But keep in mind, we have been upright for over 3 million years communicating one way or another, by grunts, by pointing, by a different way, by hitting. But we have communicated in every way. We've only been speaking for about 5,000 years in a written language. So we're really not good at this thing called language. And that's why the importance of understanding what we are going to get into. So what people see is far more important than what people hear. 100% of your emotions is on your body 100% of the time. You can't hide it. Why do gamblers wear dark glasses? Because you can't control those subtleties. Why do trial attorneys hire people to analyze the jury sitting there? Because what they see is more important than what they hear. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, if the eyes say one thing and the words say another, the wise man will take the message of the former. So how long? Oh, we're going to get the first impressions later. So anyway, let's start into the brain part. And if any of you read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, wonderful communication. I see one hand back there. It's wonderful communication, 400 and some pages that explains 45 different reasons why we don't communicate well. He talks about thinking fast and slow. Part of the brain, we're going to just, okay, let me get back to the brain. The reptilian brain is the basic bottom part of the brain. It's the only thing we had 3 million years ago when we were upright, grunting with one another. Somewhere along the line, another 1 million years later, we developed the middle brain. The middle brain is what Daniel Kahneman refers to as the fast brain. Some people refer to it as the lizard brain. It goes by a variety of names. It's our emotional center. It came along over 1 million years ago. About 1.5 million years ago, we developed the middle brain, the emotional part of the brain. The top part, the green part, of course, is what we refer to as a rational brain, if there is such a thing. It's the rational, it's the conscious, it's the thinking. The purple in the center, the middle brain, acts unconsciously. We're not aware of it. It acts on its own. But it has a couple of million years of life experience. Because 1 million years ago, it decided whether you would have lunch or the saber-toothed tiger would have lunch. And it was the amygdala, which is the primary center emotional part. The amygdala, which you hear much about. It's our emotional center. It's unconscious. It's been trained to protect us for approximately 2 million years. And then somewhere along the line came the thinking brain, the cortex, much later, much slower. The last thing you need to know is what is a neuron, except for one point. This is the neuron. We've heard mind, body is one, but it sounds woo-woo. Mind, body, this mind, body, spirit. You know, I teach anger management, and anger management in the 50s, it was just, oh, get over it. But by the 80s, we learned the mind-body connection. So we knew we had to get rid of the anger because anger causes all kinds of emotional things we'll talk about. But So we taught you to punch a pillow. Go punch a pillow, get rid of the anger, right? You remember that in the 80s? Go punch a pillow. Somehow get rid of your anger. That was a wonderful training for the next time you got in front of that person. You were really prepared to punch. So we learned that anger management is much, much more than that. And the mind-body of the neuron, every time you have any kind of a thought, experience, feeling, emotion, it creates electrical chemical things in the neurons. And the neuron is our center of where we think, of where we act. It causes the series of neurons are actually connected to our nerves and actually are our nerves and go to absolutely every organ, every muscle, every part of our body. So it starts in the brain with every thought. You have 85 billion of these little guys stashed away in your brain. Your textbooks say 100 billion, but that was before we learned how to count. And there was something about 6 years ago, a lady neuroscientist finally figured out how to count these little things in the brain. But each one of these neurons have anywhere from 1 to 1,000 connections. So it gives you over 100 trillion options of thought, of what you can do, what you can think. How they act, of these 85 billion, now they manufacture about 200 different neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters are the chemical things that run through, create the nerve link, create action in our body. You think, it causes action. Whatever you think will cause an action in your body because of these little guys up here. They are important. If you have a real hard thought, there's enough electricity going on to light a 60-watt light bulb in your brain. It's pretty phenomenal. If you want to understand the electricity of the neuron, talk to me later. I don't have time. And nor is it important. None of this is important except that remember that this is the one key part that converts every thought into action which you have no control over, or very little. We'll talk about that. So 200 neurotransmitters, and about 8 or 10 are critical for our way of thinking and our knowledge. If somebody is highly depressed, we give you drugs that will affect serotonin and dopamine, two of the positive drugs. Dopamine makes you feel good about yourself, serotonin makes you feel good about other people, and then you have GABA, which makes you feel good about the world, and oxytocin. Have you ever heard the name oxytocin? Oxytocin, the love chemical. The mother is flooded with oxytocin at birth, which creates that strong bond. But you want to also be aware of it because any time you connect with another individual, you create oxytocin. And when you handshake, and make sure when you handshake, you touch right in here in the center, that's your emotional center in the handshake. If a good, solid, warm handshake will create oxytocin, which is why it creates that bond. The fist bumps, the elbow bumps, forget it. They're nice for health reasons, perhaps, but they do nothing for building oxytocin. A good hug creates oxytocin unless it was unwanted, then it doesn't create oxytocin. So keep it happy. So anyway, and so I don't get too carried away. So then you also have the chemicals that create what we call negative thoughts, but let's talk about that. The neurons also, if you have a negative thought or an anxious thought or a stressed thought or an accident or a situation, the neurons that create cortisol come into action. You've heard of cortisol, you've heard of adrenaline. They're called negative drugs. Cortisol is called the aging drugs. It's called a lot of things. Bottom line is there are no bad neurotransmitters in your brain. It's how we use them. Cortisol wakes you up in the morning just as melatonin floods your brain at night to help you to go to sleep. You wake up, cortisol floods your brain in the morning to help you wake up. They all have a valuable reason. Adrenaline to keep you going, to keep you exercising, to keep you running, to keep you feeling good. But over stress, you develop a lot of cortisol, a lot of adrenaline. The problem with that is, what it does is draw all of your blood from your functioning organs, sends it to your muscles, preparing you for flight or flight. So when we live in stress, we are pulling blood and all of the proper medicines for all of our functioning organs. Stomach problems, intestinal problems, certainly heart problems, breathing problems from stress. It goes on and on and on. Because we're filling our body with the cortisol, drawing the blood from the organs, sending it to the muscles, preparing us for fight or flight. And there are so many people, and I know in our society, think, well, stress is normal. Well, no, it isn't. Stress is not normal. You have an option, and that's what we're going to talk about later on. Some of the critical things. Everything that you touch, down here, everything that you touch, everything that you see, everything that you hear, everything that you taste, everything you feel goes into the middle brain, primarily the amygdala first. Everything goes into the middle brain first. How long does it take to make a first impression? A few seconds?
Less than a second.
Less than a second. The first impressions are made in 13 milliseconds. And for all you non-math people, there's 1,000 milliseconds in a second. Within 13 milliseconds, your subconscious will make a decision about what they see, what they hear, what they feel. Then, it could be the most healthy, fastest young brain will take 700 milliseconds before you get to the top. Typically, it's 1,000 to 2,000 milliseconds. That is the space that Viktor Frankl is talking about. That's the space that will determine your success in life, your happiness in life, and your joy. How do you deal and control that space? It immediately goes into the amygdala, and then eventually finds its way up to your rational brain, your thinking brain. Doesn't happen right away, automatically. First of all, the orbital and the ventromedial are the one and the same. The last thing you need to know is know any of these names of this picture. What you need to know is your cortex thinking brain has actually two parts that argue. Have any of you ever tried to figure out, should I have that second cookie? Should I have that second helping? I really want that fancy sports car, but can I afford that fancy sports car? Have any of you had these issues? Can I buy this house? Which dress should I? There's two parts to the cortical brain, to the thinking brain. One's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That's a name you don't need to remember. You need to remember it's a little round spot right here. This is your Dr. Spock. There is no emotion. This is strictly logic. Because right over here, you've got the ventromedial. That's connected to your amygdala. So that's how your cortex knows what emotion is going on. Now, up until the 80s, for the thousands of years, since philosophers have been philosophizing, we have been saying, control your emotions. Think logical. Just be reasonable, right? Just be logical. Get rid of the emotion. Just think about this. And it wasn't until the 80s that, and our better understanding of what's going on in the brain, that we realized that all of our emotion comes from the other part, the ventromedial portion of the brain. So it balances, and so the perfect person is that balance. When you're living in stress, when you're living in high anxiety, it's affecting this brain, which will affect your decisions. if you live in a lot of stress, your amygdala grows big, which creates more stress, which creates bipolar and a variety of other things, which is still arguing with the cortical, but now it's strong enough to overrun the dorsolateral, your logical. So there is this balance going on that's controlled largely by the size of your amygdala, which you can control by reducing stress. Meditation, quiet moments will shrink the amygdala, bring you back into a healthy position. Living in stress, living in anxiety, eating processed foods, well, I won't go there. But anyway, stay out of stress. Now, why is this? The other part, let's look at this. This is the balance. How many here, who can tell me the 4 questions of the 4-way test real quickly?
Is it the truth? Is it off
Truth. It is fair. Will it be goodwill? Those are the 4 concepts you normally think of when you hear the 4-way test. If any of you ever thought about why the first 2 questions are, is it? And the second 2 questions are, will it? The first 2 questions, is it? For you philosophers, that's deontological philosophy. It's absolute. It's part of our brain that is absolute. Truth is. There's no question. It's either fair or it is not fair. It's black and white. So part of our brain is that black and white, and we need that. But we balance that with will it, which is, again, for you, teleological philosophy, which means what is the greater good? So we're constantly balancing our greater good against the absolute truth. We hear so much about polarization, over and over and over about polarization. And we hear programs, the One America programs, phenomenal programs, Braver Angels, phenomenal programs, dealing with polarization. But I posit that all our polarization merely comes down to what's the most important to us. Where are we on this continuum of me and we? When you stop and think, if it's taxes, if it's abortion, if it's hospital and medical, if it's whatever, it gets into a battle of balancing me and we. What's the greater good? Wait a minute. I'm important. Yes, you're important. How important are you? So when you're dealing with a polarized world, stop and think and put it all back into, we're dealing with this personal issue. How can we move somebody out of that me over we and a little bit more of the we over me? So that's the polarization. What is really polarization? Again, when you're talking about taxes, I don't want to pay taxes because they don't know what to do with the money. They don't handle it right. Well, you got to pay taxes so we have services. So where is that balance? I don't want to pay for somebody else's medical and hospitalization. No, wait a minute. Healthcare is a right to all. So where is that balance? And all of your polarization, think of it in terms of where are we on this continuum of we over me, or me over we. So, how many here, when you walk into a room of strangers, are you invited into that group? Do people open up and say, come on in, or do they acknowledge you and turn their back to you? Do you feel like you're honored and respected and brought into the conversation when you walk into a room of strangers? That's what charisma is, that presence that everybody wants to be part of. So 1886, no, it's not okay. 1886, there was a big election in England. between Gladstone and Disraeli. A journalist, shortly before the election, realized there was one lady who had dinner with both of those a different night. So that journalist went immediately to that person to find out who that was and what they were saying. And he asked the lady, well, how was it with the two? And she said, well, the first night I had dinner with Mr. Gladstone, and you know, by the end of the evening, I had no doubt that Mr. Gladstone was the smartest man in all England. Said great. And the next night, yes, the next night was with Mr. Disraeli. And we had a wonderful dinner, and after all evening, I realized I was the smartest person in all of England. Mr. Disraeli won, hands down, no chance. It's not about making people feel you are important, it's how can you make others feel important. And that's the way to connect. So, to people, yeah, okay. So, charisma is about creating presence, creating warmth. What is the presence? What do people see? What do people feel is important if you want to communicate, connect, change the world. So the presence of God, what do they see? What is your attire? How do you look? And presence, I'm probably a little shorter statured than many of us, so I yank very hard on this. But again, look like the Army general that's checking his troops. How do they stand? Shoulders back, grab this chest cable and yank it up. And to get your shoulders back where they belong, your head, your chin straight forward, your chin up. It tends to be a little cocky, chin's down, tends to be subservient. Straight shoulders, straight chins. That's the physiology. What is the attire that people see? Everything else being equal, I'm going to pick the person that's better dressed. Yes, attire is important. Not always important, but and again, like in sales, be one step ahead of your client, but not too. The eye contact is important, but I don't even like eye contact. I like to connect with the soul. So how do you do that? First of all, do you know the color of the eyes of the other person you're looking at? Even. Let's start there. Another little bit of physiology is your left brain crosses over to the occipital lobe in the back to the right brain. I'm sorry, the left eye crosses to the right brain. Your right eye crosses over to the left brain. The nerves cross over in the brain. So if I want to connect with you emotionally, I'm going to look into your left eye because that's crossing over into your emotional center. So if I want to connect to you emotionally, if I want to sound knowledgeable, I'll look into your right eye, except for the fact, if I connect to you with emotion, if I can connect with you that you are comfortable with me, I can go anywhere with you. I don't need to impress you on what I know. I need to impress you with what you know. So look in the eye. What is the color of that right eye? So presence. I want to So presence, what is the presence? What do people see? And now then, in warmth, what do people feel about you and how do we make that? In theater, we finally learned about 50, 70 years ago, Stanislavski, when was, Stanislavski, method acting. What year it was? Anyway, in acting, we learned, finally realized that we can't teach you to act the part. Because when you are acting the part, you are acting, you are not the part. I can't connect with you when I'm sitting here thinking, I need to connect with you. I need to connect with you. And how do I do that? It's called method acting. You become the part. You dump the brain, you dump your cup to listen so you hear. RFD2L is a formula I used to use. Relax in communication, focus, and have a desire to learn. But one challenge of focus, one big challenge to focus, we speak on average at 125 to 150 words a minute. You hear at a rate of 500 to 800 words a minute. You have to consciously focus and work at focusing. You have to be there. You have to be in their presence. You have to dump your cup of feelings. You have to be part of that. So dump your cup. One of the challenges also in communication is context. One thing I didn't talk about, this little thing up here, 3 pounds of your brain uses 25% of all your body energy. 3 pounds of your body uses 25% of all your energy. Thinking uses the majority of that. Guess why we don't think a lot? Why do your electronics companies in California all have PlayStations? Because after a while, our brain will fatigue. Again, I worked in prisons for a while and became aware that 60% of inmates that go before the parole board within 2 hours after lunch most likely will get parole. If you're beyond 2 hours, 0. And that's a statistic which you can verify right now. Beyond 3 hours, beyond 2 hours, 0. Judges on the court, later in the day, the brain fatigues. They say, well, hell, he robbed the bank, of course he's gone, lock him up. So we're not taking in the considerations. Doctors, at the end of the day, call for very few tests, much less tests. They're much ruder to people of other cultures. So the brain fatigues, and metabolism lasts about 2 hours if we have eaten something decent. Now, the judge that had a cup of coffee and a donut in the morning, you better get there 15 hours after he's on the bench, otherwise then he's gone. The brain fatigues because literally the brain is drawing 25% of your body energy. The metabolism goes away fairly quickly. So what the other thing, you said I had 3 hours, didn't you, Ray? Oh, how can I do it? Anyway, no, I 2 hours. Anyway, I'm going to give you a couple of tips on working. The whole purpose, in my mind, is to build peace builders. I want you to all go out and change the world. Please start tomorrow. So how do we do that? What are some of the techniques of dealing with that awkward individual? That individual you don't want. And find 3 things about them that you do like. No matter how horrible that person is, in your humble opinion, find 3 things. Maybe it's their shoes, maybe it's their hair, maybe it's their shirt, maybe it's their smile, maybe it's whatever. Find something in that person you can be positive about. What is their upbringing? What is their story? How did they get there? Again, context. What, did they just get a check in the mail, or did they just get a divorce paper in the mail? If negative, if you hear the verbiage beginning to rise, the tension beginning to rise, if you hear their tempo beginning to increase, their pitch rising, you have lost rapport. And it's critical when you're in a discussion to recognize that you have no ability to justify or defend your position when you are in that position. Go back to a point of rapport. Go back to talking about the kids. Find another way to come in and bring up that conversation that is being challenged to you. So Oh, the other thing, I actually have a clown nose in my car. Because when I'm stuck in traffic and there's traffic all over and people are honking horns, I put the clown nose in. People will look over and just break up. See the individual that you don't like with a clown nose. See them with Mickey Mouse ears. It changes you because you cannot consciously control every part of the message of your body. What you can control is your feelings, and if you find that point of happiness and joy, that will be expressed on your body. So many more, but I want to go into, I've got some techniques on some special techniques on how we can control our emotions. And deep breath, we all know that, take a deep breath. But use the 4-7-8 formula. The Navy SEALs uses this, Edward Weil is one of my gurus, teaches this at Arizona State University. 4-7-8. Keep in mind you have two nerve systems running down your body, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. You don't need to remember that. You have two nerves running down. One energizes, goes to every organ in your body and energizes it. Tells your heart to speed up, your lung to speed up. And then the other one says, no, slow down, slow down, slow down. So when you breathe in, you activate the energetic, the sympathetic nervous system. When you breathe out, you energize the parasympathetic or the relaxing nervous system. So breathe in for the count of 4, hold for the count of 7 so that your lungs and everything can clear, and then breathe out on the count of 8. Whatever the numbers, come close to that. If you're going to take a test, I teach this in the anger management to calm yourself down, to help you get to sleep at night. If you're finding yourself in distress, use that. Think the word stop. When I hear myself beating up on myself, oh, I can't do this, oh my God, how can I ever do this? Me? I can't do this. I'm probably the only one that's ever had dealt with imposter syndrome. If they only knew. If they only knew what I didn't know. That's the imposter syndrome. Einstein suffered from the imposter syndrome. When we hear ourselves beating up on ourselves, think the word stop. Because just that action moves us from the middle brain, because all of this is coming from the unconscious, automatic brain that's sitting there babbling, trying to protect us, move us into the conscious brain, just thinking the word stop. Rehearsal. Have you ever had an experience with anybody that you were just uncomfortable with that person? You went somewhere and you had a horrible experience. Again, your amygdala will protect you. It wants to protect you from ever having that negative experience again with that individual. So when you go back to that individual that you once had a negative experience with, your body will be the billboard of, I'm not going to like this. So how do you change that again? Prepare in your mind, rehearsal, stop. Again, find 3 things you like, move yourself into that happy moment. There is no greater way to tell somebody they are important than the pause. As I said, that pause, that space between the middle brain, immediate 13 milliseconds, and the thinking brain, 2,000 seconds. How can I expand that? That's by learning the pause. When somebody asks you a question, when somebody says something to you, when you have a thought, give it at least 1 second, maybe 2, before you respond. Because if I pause, I'm telling you, I'm hearing you. I care. It's making you feel important, and I'm preparing a more logical response. So that rehearsal. Be the third party. This is magnificent. In other words, if you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, what is the camera on the wall seeing? What is the microphone on the wall hearing? You can do that for yourself. When you're in a heated argument with somebody, set yourself, visualize yourself over here in the other room, and look into this as from a third party. It's a way, again, to move you out of that emotional state into a more logical state. Be your own third party. Move away. So, reframe. Oh, assume the positive. Assume the positive. Why should that be important? Because every one of you out here, 80% of your thoughts on a daily basis are negative. 95% of your thoughts on a daily basis are repetitive. 80% of your thoughts on a daily basis are negative. You're checking this, how do I deal with this, blah, 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 blah. So when we go into something, this is also why we like to hear negative news, because it makes us feel better about ourselves. Positive news, we don't live up to that, so I don't like positive news. Negative news, I'm better than that, but I'm not better than the positive news. But we live in this world of negativity, unless you do meditation and other choices. But anyway, be aware that when you go into that experience, that tendency is to think, oh, this is not going to go well for me. That's a choice. That's a choice. So assume the positive. When we know that it's going to work out well, we, I can't see what did I say. Did I have another hour? 5 hours. Oh, she just gave me 5 more hours. And anyway, what was I talking about? Just at that, I was just checking to see if anybody's listening. Is anybody out there? But anyway, 8%. When you can get yourself into that mental frame of this is going to work out, it's amazing the subconscious energy you begin to work towards that positive outcome versus going into it with our typical negative experience. So, reframe. You know, when I really got into this, I realized that in life, I no longer have any enemies. I have no enemies whatsoever. I do have a few teachers. I do have a few teachers that help me see where I am, because when I find myself in this negative environment, I have to ask myself, what have I done to bring this into my life right now? Where am I? What have I done? Why is this going on? What can I do to move out of it? So look for that reframe. There are many ways of looking at anything in life. We have a choice. Just as I thought I knew what a car was when I walked in here. And I realized I had no clue of what a car was. Just as we reframed a car multiple ways, there's nothing in life you cannot also reframe. So get rid of the 80% of negativity, find that positivity and move on. Mindfulness, again, a deep breath. Every time I sit down to eat a meal, I will take a very deep breath. Very deep breath, exhaling slowly, will move you into another place so I can be in with that meal. How many of you can eat a meal in all five flavors? Salt, sour, bitter, sweet, umami. Yeah, find 5 flavors. This is when the next time you eat, for those that haven't done this, when you do that, you will develop that skill of focus. Focus in that moment, what you're doing now. Find and search what are the flavors. Are all 5 here, or what is missing? So, progressive muscle relaxation, again, pretty somewhat self-explanatory. You can do this throughout your body instantly, quickly, or you can do it one portion at a time. In other words, tighten your butt muscles and breathe in, and then relax and breathe out. Again, it's just a way of getting rid of tension. Your arm muscles that are tightening as you're breathing in, and then relax as you breathe out. And it just will take away that stress that we tend to bring into ourselves. It's all too often. Use the alphabet. Is that enough for this group? When I'm dealing with anger management, so I'm getting the hook. Anyway, and I'm not done. Usually the opposite hand. And when I'm really dealing with real anger management issues where people are really lost connection with their cortical brain, and this is quite common, particularly drug addicts and variety of things, we completely, anybody that lives in a lot of stress will eliminate the cortical brain. But if you spend a day using the opposite hand, it forces you to think. It forces you to connect. The same way, count 20 backwards, 20, 19, 18, 17. I do it now as a habit to help you connect to the brain. Say the alphabet, once you've mastered this, 20 backwards, go to say the alphabet backwards. Z, Y, X, W, T, U, V, X. I have to think about it. Hang on just a minute. I have to think. But it's those little things that can virtually change where you are in a second. Force yourself to move into that thinking brain. Say the alphabet backwards and love yourself. Love yourself. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Go change the world.